everyone, and welcome to John's Drams, the channel where I, John, talk about whiskey-related stuff. And today, as of the time of recording, it has been announced that Waterford are dead, or certainly dying at any rate. They're gone. They have not made it to 10 years. So, I first heard the news about 8 hours at the time of recording, so as you can tell, I'm putting this out pretty quickly, because I'm trying to get my finger on that there pulse. And also because I've got some thoughts about this one, because when I heard the news that Waterford had gone, I thought that's a shame, but I wasn't surprised, not one bit. So I thought, well, why is it that I'm not surprised? Because I've gotten to know Waterford a little bit, but I think I can't speak for everyone, because I mean, duh. But from what I've been hearing and discussed and with other people, is that my experience with Waterford has been shared quite commonly. So I thought I'd talk about some of the reasons why I think that this news isn't a surprise. So this, I guess, is going to be a listicle, because I've managed to find 5 reasons. It wasn't deliberate. It's just kind of how it's come out. I just wrote some stuff in a book, and it's turned out to be 5 little notes. So I'm going to talk about those 5 little notes. So this is 5 reasons Waterford's dead. That's garish. But yeah, I might. Yeah. So the first note I've got down is that they didn't have a core offer, at least certainly not in the traditional sense. So Waterford, for those of you who aren't aware, Irish distillery, and their focus is on single farm origin. So picking a farm, having the barley grown there, and focusing on the terroir and the difference that the locality of where the barley is grown makes to the whiskey. And if that translates through the distillation process and into making the whiskey. And they go into serious geekery about this stuff. Like, they can tell you basically anything you want to know, right down to, I think, like, the amount of rain that was present during the production of the whiskey when it was in barley form on the farm. There's even a little thing on the website which, if you have a bottle of Waterford, there's a code on the bottle, and you can punch that into the website, and it will give you details about that bottle from literally birth to death. Well, not death, I suppose, but, to bottle. So that's really interesting, like the traceability of that kind of thing. Similar to, like, I think there was a thing in the early noughties where you would buy a pack of lamb and you could trace it from, in that case, literally birth to death. There was like a pilot scheme for British lamb and stuff like that, and that was a bit more macabre, to be honest, but yeah. Am I remembering that right? I'm not sure if I am remembering that right, but anyway. So it's difficult for anyone to latch onto their core offer, because there isn't one. All of their stuff was things like Bannow Island, or I forget the other names of them at the minute, but that's kind of in my own point. Like, I can't name anything of theirs off the top of my head. Like, if somebody said, oh, Kilhoman, oh, Senegan, Maccabee, oh, and they also do Loch Gorm, oh, and they've just done the Castor. Like, you can latch onto that. You know what's going on there. Same as, like, Jameson's. Like, you've got your Jameson's Normal, then you've got your Crested, then you've got the Caskmates. They do an IPA, and they do a stout finish, and they've also got an 18-year-old if you're in something a bit more premium. I can still name ranges. Even, like, I'm not a Jameson's drinker. I don't care about Jameson's. I don't like it as a product, but we'll be coming back to Jameson's in this discussion at some point, because it's not a fair comparison, but it is an important comparison. And we have to also talk a little bit about Bruichladdich in this. So we're going to. Now, Bruichladdich is another good example of how you can do what Waterford started doing, but manage it in a way that is commercially viable. And the reason I use Bruichladdich, for those of you who don't know, there is a bit of shared ancestry between Bruichladdich and Waterford, and I won't go into it here because it involves names and dates and people and places, and I don't have that information to hand at the moment. So, yeah, you can look that all up in your own time. But Bruichladdich, they've got 3 brands, if you like. They've got their core Bruichladdich brand for their unpeated stuff. They've got Port Charlotte for their heavily peated And then they've got Octomore for their insanely peated, which also delves more into your unusual cask varieties, your odd maturations, your super heavily peated, your farm origin, and your single barley origin as well. So that's a key aspect of that as well. What Waterford has basically done is they've gone, let's just do Octomore. Now, there's an issue with that, in the Octomore, yes, it has that, this has been made only on Octomore Farm, or this is only made using barley from that's been grown on Isla, or from a particular farm, or a particular plot of land, or we've only done X, Y, and Z to this whiskey, and it makes it more interesting and unique. That's fine. But there's two reasons why that works very well with Octomore. One, it's not the whole offer. Bruichladdich has its core. It has its Port Charlotte 10-year-old, and it has its classic laddie in the bright blue bottle. And they're what puts dinner on the table. That's what pays the bills. And it's also well-made whiskey. They just don't go to the same trouble as the barley has to be from this one particular farm, and we have to be able to trace everything about it, because that takes time and effort and money. And you have to basically gamble that people actually give a shit about that stuff. And I think what Waterford have learned the hard way here is that people don't give a shit about that, or they certainly don't care enough to be coming back to the whiskey time and time again. And the other thing that keeps Octomore alive is that it's quite a simple one, but as someone who is in the retail sphere, if you want to shift some Octomore, you just say, oh, this is the world's heaviest, most heavily smoked whiskey. Sold. It's got a story, it's got something you can latch onto that is simple, people can comprehend and understand, and it's unique to that. In a way, Waterford had that as well, because it's the only Irish distillery that is making use of that level of sort of macro terroir, for want of a better way of putting it. The problem is, it's more difficult to explain what that is. A lot of people don't even know what terroir means. A lot of people struggle to pronounce terroir, and that's completely understandable. I'm not actually convinced I'm doing it right myself. It's a slightly janky word in that respect. But it's difficult to tell a story about it as well. This is still point one, incidentally, so this is actually going to be quite a long video. But yeah, no core offer, nothing that people can latch onto, and they didn't learn why earlier attempts at this model worked. There wasn't a balance to make the distillery commercially viable to begin with. The second reason is that the whiskey itself wasn't approachable. Depending on what variety you got, it was nice, but there's another problem with it, in that you had so many different farm varieties, and there was 1.1, 1.2, and 2.1, stuff like that it would change a little bit. The whole point of Waterford was that it was ever-changing. But that presents a problem, in that if you try some Waterford, it's not very nice, and you try something else, and that's really good, well, you don't know what the next one's going to be like. And there's no way of trying it beforehand, so it's a massive risk involved in that. And my own experiences with Waterford were that it had some promise to it, but I wouldn't exactly say it was delicious. It wasn't a sipper, and it wasn't something that I would gravitate towards. The last time I drank Waterford, I was actually in Bath. Was I in the Hideout? I'm not sure I was in the Hideout. Anyway, I was in a bar in Bath, and I got chatting to the guys there. We were nearly closed, and I ended up trying some Waterford whilst I was there. And I think it was the Sheeshtown 1.2, I think. And it was lovely, delicious. And I remember telling them at the time, I was like, I've tried a few Waterfords and I'm just not gelling with them. And they managed to convince me, actually, this one's a really good one. But we get where you're coming from with it. And so I tried it, and yes, it was delicious. And I can't completely remember which one it was. I think it was the Sheeshtown 1.2, but I'm not certain. So again, we get back to that thing of it's difficult to latch onto it. But I have a couple of notes here. So I'm part of the Aquavitae Facebook group. slash cult, whatever you want to call it. Um, and the news is broke and people are commenting variously, and I've just picked out a couple of words which have come up more than once on people saying, oh, well, it's a shame that Waterford is gone. And those are challenging and interesting. Those are not words that are going to make people fork over their hard-earned cash, because it's a gamble on a bottle. The bottles themselves are gorgeous, but the contents do actually matter, and this is one of the examples of the contents mattering and them arguably not getting it right in a bizarre way. The whiskey itself is very well made, and there's clear effort and passion and love gone into it, but it's resulted in them having to close the doors. Point 3 kind of relays into that as well. The bottles themselves are expensive. Depending on where you look, and depending on the release as well, you can be looking to put down about £60 to £80 for a single estate Irish whiskey. Now again, part of that is for the experience of getting to try, whiskey made in the southeast of Ireland that's from this one particular farm, and they've got this particular barley, and they've grown it, all that kind of lovely fun stuff. If Brexit has taught us one thing, it's that the people of Britain, and by extension our neighbours in Ireland, don't actually give much of a shit about farmers. So yeah, the whole farming angle isn't going to be the attractive element that I think they thought this was going to be. And also, the last few years have been pretty rough economically. I mean, not if you're friends of people in power, but, for Johnny Normal on the street, it's been pretty rough going. There's been wage stagnation, recessions, Liz Truss. It's been a hard old time for anyone with a wallet, as opposed to a offshore bank account. And so luxuries like this, particularly ones that you can't necessarily say, I know what this is, like something like a Glenallachie 15, we know that's stunning liquid. We're not going to be buying it all the time, but as a treat or a birthday present or something like that, but like, right, I know that stuff good, so I'm going to save up for it, and that's going to be my little treat to myself. I'm going to have it in the back of the cupboard, and I might dip into it every once in a while. I can't think of anyone that I've ever heard of saying that about Waterford. So cost comes into that, and also whether or not it's a worthwhile investment in people's money, and it would appear that the answer's just been no. Fourth point that I've written down here is the Irish themselves. Now I'm going somewhere with this, because you probably sat there right now and was like, oh god, what's he going to say? No. The Irish are creatures of habit. They know what they like, and they stick to it. The term that I use for Irish visitors in my pub is they're very brand loyal. They trust things that they have an established relationship with. They trust the brand, for better or for worse. They know what they like, and they stick to it. We get a lot of Irish guests in, and we notice the same things happening. They ask for the same few things. So you get asked for Coors Light, for Corona, for what's that shitty stuff? Heineken, Magners, stuff like that. Very strong, nationwide, well-known brands that they have tried, know they like, and they trust them because they're consistent and they're readily available. Except in my little hipster corner. But overall, very readily and easily available. So introducing a product like this, which is basically turning the Irish whiskey scene up on its head, is going to be a bit of a struggle with the locals. I'm not saying everyone's cut from the same cloth on this one. That's insanity. But as a general observation of a people, this one has been quite consistent for myself, and so I can't help but think that there is something to it. So it's a market that's a little, not hostile, but hesitant towards anything that is new and unknown. And Waterford is very much not new anymore. It's 9 years old. It didn't quite make it to 10, but certainly unknown. And again, we've talked about some of the unknowability of it because it's quite a volatile product. It's changing all the time. And that's antithetical to what, for myself, certainly a lot of Irish drinkers enjoy. And the last point I'm going to make here, it just wasn't that good. That's the harsh truth of it. I can't think of a time where I've heard of anyone talking about Waterford in glowing terms. I've heard various people describing it, as I've said on here, as challenging, interesting, engaging, but I've not heard a lot of people just being like, it's just delicious, or you need to try this stuff, or oh, I tried this the other day and it was this one, and oh my god. And again, coming at this from the Aquavitae page, I've made a couple of notes of different people's comments on this one. There's two that I've picked out in particular. One saying that it wasn't the most approachable, and the other saying they really weren't blown away by anything that they tried. And that kind of resonates with me as well. Like, I've tried the stuff, and I mean, I've had some nice stuff of theirs, but it's never made me want to try more of it, or go out and buy a bottle, or look more into it. Waterford for me has always had this kind of bizarre kind of, it's there, but I don't know what the game is here. I've been waiting for it to kind of consolidate itself and decide what it wants to do. And unfortunately, it never did. And now we're kind of stood here at the end. And all those people that hoovered up the 1.1s when it first came out must be laughing now, because suddenly it's going to be worth a bit of money. So good for them. I wasn't one of those people. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Waterford. Let me know in the comments. Are you sad that Waterford is closing down? Was it one of your favourite distilleries? Do you think I'm being harsh on the Irish? That's always touchy territory, just in general, isn't it? I'm actually going to be spending Christmas in Ireland, so I might not make it back alive, I suppose. Yeah, let me know down below. Also, I had somebody recently commenting, am I gone? I hope that answers the question for this. And I'll be releasing another video in the not-too-distant future kind of explaining what's coming, because I am aware for the last 18 months that I periodically have just been like, oh yeah, more stuff's coming, and then there's these big drought periods. So I'm going to be addressing those, because that's not good and not fair, and I still want to be making these. So, yeah, but that's another video. For now, though, thank you very much for watching, and do join me next time, where I'll be drinking, discussing, slating another whiskey.